He divorced his black wife for a younger, more vibrant lady, thinking he had found the perfect replacement. But little did he know, the woman he discarded would rebuild her life in a way he never imagined. As his empire crumbled, she found love in the arms of his billionaire boss, a man who truly saw her worth. Can the man who left her ever reclaim what he lost? Or is it too late for redemption? Stay tuned and watch the drama unfolds. Lena stood at the kitchen counter. The house was quiet, too quiet, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound that broke the stillness. It was a weekday morning like any other, but something was different. Marcus had been distant for months now. His late nights at work had become an almost nightly routine, his phone more of a constant companion than she was. The texts had stopped coming. The small, affectionate gestures that once kept their marriage warm had become a memory. Lena wasn't blind to the changes. At first, she told herself it was just the grind of life, work, bills, responsibilities. But as time passed, her heart began to feel the weight of his silence. She'd asked him about it once, gently, trying to hide the unease creeping into her voice. "Marcus, is everything okay? You've been working a lot lately. Is there something on your mind?" He'd brushed it off with a wave of his hand. "It's just the job, babe. Nothing to worry about." But his eyes, those eyes that once held so much love, had shifted. They no longer looked at her the same way. Lena sighed, glancing out the window at the life they had built together. 10 years of marriage, countless memories, shared dreams. They'd been partners, teammates, companions. But somewhere in the quiet moments, Lena could feel the unraveling, the slow drift that had become too noticeable to ignore. Then came the day that shattered everything. It was a late afternoon, the kind where the golden light of the setting sun cast a soft glow through the curtains. Marcus had come home from work earlier than usual. He was already sitting on the couch, his coat slung over the back, his gaze distant. Lena stood by the kitchen door, preparing dinner, when he spoke. "I think we need to talk." His voice was flat, emotionless, and it sent a chill down her spine. Her heart skipped a beat. She set the knife down, wiping her hands on the towel, and walked over to him, trying to steady the panic rising in her chest. "What's wrong?" she asked, already sensing the storm that was coming. Her stomach twisted. "I've met someone," Marcus said, his words cutting through her like a knife. "I think it's time we go our separate ways." Lena felt as if the world had been ripped from under her. The room felt smaller, suffocating. The sound of Marcus's voice echoed in her mind, but it didn't make sense. She stood there, frozen, as her husband of 10 years casually dismantled the life they had built together. You've met someone?" she managed, her voice shaky, as if the words themselves were foreign. Marcus nodded, his gaze never meeting hers. "She's younger, vibrant. I think I'm in love with her." "I'm sorry, Lena. This is the right decision for both of us." The room began to spin, and Lena's world tilted. The man she had trusted, loved, and built a future with had fallen for someone else. Someone younger. Someone who wasn't her. Her mind raced, struggling to process what he was saying. The pain surged through her chest like a wildfire, raw, uncontrollable. Her hands trembled at her sides. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. "Why?" she whispered. "What happened, Marcus? Wasn't I enough?" Marcus stood up slowly, avoiding her gaze. "I don't want to hurt you, but I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I need to be with someone else." The simplicity of his words was what destroyed her the most. There was no apology, no remorse, just a cold finality in his tone. The divorce papers came a few weeks later. Marcus didn't hesitate. He moved out of their shared home and into a sleek downtown apartment, already starting his life with a new woman. The one Lena wasn't. She was left to pick up the pieces of her life, pieces she wasn't even sure she could recognize anymore. Lena threw herself into her work, diving headfirst into the routine, hoping it would numb the ache in her heart. But no matter how busy she kept herself, no matter how many hours she spent at the office, the pain lingered. It never fully went away. Every memory, every photograph, every small piece of their shared history was now tainted with betrayal. She would lie awake some nights, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the man she once knew with the stranger who had walked away from her. But it didn't matter anymore. Marcus had made his choice, and Lena was left in the wreckage of a life she thought she knew. The ache was constant, like a dull throb in the background of her every thought. The life she had loved, the life she had worked for, was gone. And she was left with the devastating truth that the man who had sworn to love her forever had walked away for someone else. Lena's life had fallen into a quiet rhythm. The house felt empty now, though it was just as it had always been. She had tried to fill the silence with work, diving into projects and meetings, keeping herself busy enough to avoid the dark corners of her mind. But the emptiness lingered. The days blurred into one another, each a reminder of what she had lost, each a testament to a life she had never expected to unravel so suddenly. The divorce had left a wound that didn't seem to heal. She was still grappling with the coldness Marcus had left behind, the way he moved on with ease, taking their life, their memories, and starting fresh with someone else. She couldn't understand how someone could toss away 10 years of commitment as though it meant nothing. The ache of betrayal never fully faded. It followed her like a shadow, always there, no matter how much she tried to outrun it. Then, one afternoon, her colleague, Sarah, slipped a brightly colored invitation onto her desk. "It's a charity event. You should come," Sarah said, offering her a smile full of hope. "I know you've been through a lot, but maybe a change of scenery would do you good." Lena glanced at the invitation, her eyes drawn to the name of the venue, Harrington Manor. She didn't know much about it, but the thought of going somewhere unfamiliar, surrounded by strangers, made her stomach twist. It wasn't that she didn't want to socialize. She just wasn't sure she could pretend to be okay. But Sarah was insistent, and after some coaxing, Lena found herself in the car that evening, on her way to a lavish charity gala she hadn't anticipated attending. The glittering lights of the venue shimmered as she stepped out of the car. The night air felt crisp against her skin as she made her way inside, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses filling the space. She took a deep breath, adjusting her dress, and entered the ballroom. There were chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, their crystals catching the light. The room was filled with people, some chatting, others exchanging business cards, but it felt like a world she had never truly belonged to, a world of wealth, power, and polished smiles. She found herself shrinking back slightly, unsure of her place in this world. It wasn't until later in the evening that she met him. Damien Harrington. He was standing by the refreshment table, casually sipping a drink, but his presence was undeniable. Tall, with a well-fitted suit that seemed to have been made just for him, Damien was everything Marcus had never been. Approachable, warm, and confident without the arrogance. Lena's eyes were drawn to him almost immediately, but she couldn't quite place why. He wasn't the typical billionaire that she had come to know from headlines and tabloids. He wasn't distant or cold. In fact, there was something about him that seemed real. As if sensing her hesitation, he turned toward her with a friendly smile. "I haven't seen you around before," he said, his voice soft but sure. "Are you new to this crowd?" Lena smiled, a little caught off guard, but she shook her head. "I'm not exactly part of this crowd," she said with a quiet laugh, pointing to her simple black dress. "I'm here because a friend insisted." "Well, it's nice to meet you. I'm Damien," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, but there was a gentleness in his touch that made her feel immediately at ease. Their conversation started light, talking about the event, the food, and the stunning venue, but quickly veered into deeper territory. He asked about her life, not with prying curiosity, but with genuine interest. When Lena hesitated, he didn't push. He just listened. As the conversation unfolded, Lena found herself talking about her past, about Marcus, about the heartbreak, the confusion. She was surprised at how easy it was to share these things with a stranger. It felt almost liberating. He didn't judge her. Instead, he nodded along, listening with empathy and understanding. "I'm sorry you went through that," he said quietly after she shared how Marcus had left. "It sounds like you gave him everything, and it wasn't enough." Lena looked up at him, meeting his eyes. There was something in his gaze, something comforting, something real, that made her heart ache in a way it hadn't in months. Their connection was immediate and intense, not just because of the mutual attraction that flared between them, but because Damien made her feel seen again. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt like she wasn't invisible. Her thoughts weren't clouded with her past or the hurt Marcus had left behind. As the evening continued, Lena found herself laughing more freely, enjoying the conversation. By the end of the night, they had exchanged numbers, and as they parted ways, Damien smiled warmly. "I'd like to see you again," he said. "No pressure. Just dinner sometime." Lena smiled, a flutter of hope stirring in her chest. "I'd like that." Over the next few months, their bond deepened. They spent time together, not just at lavish events, but in quiet corners of cafes and parks. Damien's support was unwavering, and his affection for her was the kind of love Lena had always dreamed of, kind, understanding, and unhurried. Lena realized she had found something genuine, something real, a love that wasn't about expectations, status, or appearances. Damien made her feel like she was enough, just as she was. For the first time since her marriage ended, Lena felt like she could breathe again. Lena had always believed in the simplicity of love, the soft kind that settles in your bones and wraps around you like a blanket on a cold night. After months of slowly rebuilding her heart, after learning to trust herself again, she had found something deep and meaningful with Damien. Their bond had grown over quiet dinners and late-night conversations, long walks through parks where they shared stories of the past and dreams for the future. With Damien, she felt seen in ways she had forgotten were possible. He didn't just care about her beauty or her strength. He respected her scars, her journey, and her resilience. In his eyes, she was whole, not despite her past, but because of it. He didn't rush her, didn't pressure her. He simply loved her in a way that made her feel safe. But there was still a small, lingering doubt in Lena's mind. Her previous marriage had left deep marks, and trust was something she wasn't sure she could give away so easily. She had spent years nurturing someone else's dreams, someone else's happiness, only to have it all fall apart. Could she really open her heart again? It was one evening, under the soft glow of the lights in his apartment, that Damien's gentle question pierced through her uncertainty. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice soft but serious. Lena turned to face him, a nervous flutter in her chest. She had never seen him so earnest, so focused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The air seemed to freeze for a moment, the weight of what he was about to say sinking in. Lena's heart thudded in her chest. She knew what this was, had known the moment she saw the box, but she didn't want to assume, didn't want to rush. "Lena," Damien said, his voice cracking slightly, "I love you. I love everything about you. Your heart, your strength, your beauty, and how you've allowed me to be part of your life. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air, trembling, as Lena stood still, her breath caught in her throat. 1,000 thoughts swirled in her mind. She thought of Marcus, of how he had once promised her forever and then walked away for someone younger. She thought of the pain, of the betrayal, and of how long it had taken her to rebuild herself, piece by piece. And now here she was, with someone who saw her, truly saw her, and loved her without condition. But the scar of her past still stung. She hesitated, her mind racing. Was she ready to trust again? Was she ready to give herself completely to someone, to let him into the places she had kept locked away for so long? Damien must have sensed the hesitation in her eyes because he stepped closer, taking her hands in his gaze steady and unbroken. "I'm not asking because I think you're broken, Lena," he said softly. "I'm asking because I see your strength. You've been through more than most, and yet you stand here today, whole and beautiful. I want to spend the rest of my life supporting you in every way I can. I'm not asking you to forget your past or to rush into anything you're not ready for. But I need you to know that I'm here for all of you, your past, your present, your future." Lena's chest tightened with emotion. She could feel the sincerity in his words, the honesty that poured out of him. He wasn't trying to fix her. He wasn't offering a solution to her pain. He was simply offering his love, his life, and his unwavering support. Her eyes welled up, and she shook her head gently, the weight of everything she had carried for so long coming to the surface. I've been hurt, Damien. I've been so hurt before. I don't know if I can trust again. I don't know if I can give you all of me. Damien cupped her face in his hands, his thumb gently brushing away the tears that had begun to fall. Lena, he said, his voice tender, you don't have to give me everything right away. All I ask is for a chance to love you the way you deserve. And when you're ready, I'll be here. Always. Lena felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble, piece by piece. She had been so afraid of trusting again, of losing herself in someone else. But Damien wasn't asking her to lose herself. He was asking her to choose herself with him by her side. In that moment, everything felt right. For the first time in a long time, Lena didn't feel alone. She didn't feel broken. She felt whole. She had fought through the worst of the storm, and now, standing with Damien, she could finally breathe again. With a smile, she nodded. Yes, Damien. Yes, I'll marry you. Damien's face lit up with a grin that was pure joy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, the promise of a new beginning settling between them. Months had passed since Lena had agreed to marry Damien, and every day with him had been a gentle reminder of what love should truly feel like. The pain of her past, while never fully gone, had faded into the background, a distant memory. Damien's unwavering support, the warmth of his love, and his genuine respect for her made it easy for Lena to move forward. Tonight, they were at a gala hosted by Damien's company, a grand event held in a ballroom that shimmered with the elegance of the city's elite. The chandeliers above sparkled like stars, casting soft light on the sea of polished tuxedos, satin gowns, and flawless smiles. The atmosphere was filled with the hum of high-profile conversations, laughter, and the clink of champagne flutes. Lena, dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged her form, felt confident and at ease. The woman who had once struggled to find her place in this world of wealth and power now stood among it all, her heart light and proud. Beside her, Damien stood tall, ever the picture of grace and poise, his hand resting gently on her waist. He leaned down to whisper in her ear, "You look stunning tonight." Lena smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered back. "But it's your presence that makes this night perfect." She glanced up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. As they mingled with the crowd, their connection was evident. Damien introduced her to business partners, influential figures, and guests from various corners of the corporate world. Lena had become a part of this world now, but she never felt out of place. She was no longer the uncertain woman who had watched her marriage crumble. She was Lena, the confident, loving fiancée of Damien Harrington. Then, without warning, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Lena felt a subtle change in the air. She turned her head slightly to see a familiar figure enter the ballroom. It was Marcus, her ex-husband, looking older and more worn than the man she once knew. He stood at the entrance with a woman who seemed to have little energy left in her radiance, his new girlfriend. She was blonde, much younger than Lena, but her eyes looked tired, her smile stiff. Marcus had always prided himself on his ability to charm the room, but tonight, something was different. His posture seemed less certain. The polished exterior that once defined him now seemed to crack. His eyes scanned the crowd, and when they locked onto Lena, they widened slightly, a flicker of shock passing through them. Damien, ever the gracious host, noticed the tension and took a step forward, leading Lena by the hand. He was unaware of the storm brewing within her, but his confident stride gave her the assurance that everything was different now. This was her new life, with a man who truly loved her. The moment came, and with it, the perfect introduction. "This is my beautiful fiancée, Lena," Damien said, his voice carrying across the room as he gently pulled her closer. His tone was warm, affectionate, and full of pride. "And I'd like you to meet my former employee, Marcus Johnson." The room seemed to fall silent, the murmurs of conversation dying away as all eyes turned to Marcus, his face now a mix of disbelief and discomfort. The shock on his face was evident. He stood frozen for a beat, his new girlfriend by his side, unsure of how to react. The shock wasn't just on his face, it rippled through his entire being. He had never imagined this moment. The woman he had left behind, the one he had discarded for someone younger, now stood at his former employer's side, confident, radiant, and clearly loved. Lena felt the tension in the room, but didn't reach her. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Her past with Marcus no longer defined her. She had spent years trying to make him see her worth, trying to hold onto a love that was never fully given. But now, standing beside Damien, she was whole. She was seen, and she wasn't going to let the weight of her past influence her future. Marcus finally blinked, and the realization sank in. He had lost Lena, and it was not just the love of his life he had let go. It was the life he could have had. He could feel the shift in the room, the change in how people looked at him now. His once inflated confidence had crumbled. The woman he left behind had moved forward, and now he was the one left behind. He swallowed, his voice strained. "Lena," he managed to say, his voice small in comparison to the power he once wielded. "I didn't expect." Lena simply smiled, a small, knowing smile, but her eyes didn't hold anger or bitterness. They held peace. "Neither did I," she said quietly, her gaze steady. As she looked at Marcus, something inside her shifted. The hurt he had caused her no longer had any power over her. It was gone, dissolved by time, healing, and the love that surrounded her now. She was not the woman he had discarded. She was the woman who had risen from that heartbreak, stronger and more alive than ever. The night went on, but Lena never looked back. She had made her choice long ago, to choose herself, to choose love that was real. And as Damien's hand found hers again, she knew that she had found the life she was always meant to live. The night carried on, but Marcus remained rooted in place, his eyes trained on the couple that stood just a few feet away from him. Lena, his ex-wife, the woman he had once promised forever, now stood confidently beside Damien Harrington, the billionaire who had never been afraid to see her, really see her. And there, in the quiet corner of the elegant ballroom, Marcus could feel the weight of his choices pressing down on him like a suffocating force. Lena was laughing, her voice light, her face glowing with the ease of someone who had long since let go of the past. Her smile was wide, genuine. She was radiant, and Marcus, standing just a few feet away, looking out of place in his stiff suit, his hands clenched by his sides, couldn't help but compare the woman he had left to the one standing before him. He had thought the younger woman, light, carefree, everything Lena was not, would bring him the happiness he craved. But where was she now? Where was the future he had imagined? Gone. She was nowhere to be seen. Rumors about her had started to surface, whispers about her bankrupting Marcus and abandoning him when his wealth began to dry up. Marcus had been too proud to listen, too consumed with proving he could start fresh to notice that the woman he had left his family for had always been in it for the wrong reasons. She had taken what she wanted and disappeared when the money stopped flowing. And now here he was, standing alone, watching Lena move forward without him, while he was left to pick up the pieces of a life he had discarded. Lena noticed the shift in his posture, the way his once confident stance had withered under the weight of his regret. But she didn't feel anger. She didn't feel bitterness. She simply felt peace. A peace that came from knowing that she had made the right choice. For months after the divorce, she had wondered if she was missing something, if perhaps Marcus's decision was justified, if maybe there was something wrong with her. But standing here now, watching him flounder while she stood beside the man who truly valued her, Lena finally realized that she had been right all along. Her strength, her resilience, her capacity to love herself. These had led her to a future far brighter than the one Marcus had promised her. She had left the man who didn't appreciate her, the man who couldn't see her for who she truly was, and she had moved forward, step by step, into a life filled with love, respect, and support. The guilt Marcus wore on his face now was clear, an expression of a man realizing, too late, what he had thrown away. He had walked away from a marriage that had once been filled with promise, walked away from a woman who had truly loved him, and now he was left wondering where it all went wrong. The life he could have had, the life he had built and destroyed, was slipping through his fingers, and it was no one's fault but his own. Lena didn't pity him. She had been there once, standing where he was now, questioning herself, feeling small in the shadow of someone else's decisions. But that was no longer her reality. She had grown beyond it. She was no longer the woman who clung to a failing relationship for fear of being alone. She was Lena, a woman who had learned to stand tall, to make her own choices, and to find happiness not in someone else, but within herself. She turned her attention back to Damien, who was talking to a group of guests, his voice confident and full of life. He glanced over and caught her eye, giving her a smile that made her heart swell with warmth. Lena smiled back, knowing that her journey had brought her exactly where she needed to be. She was her own person now, not defined by Marcus or their past. She was not the wife who had been discarded. She was the woman who had learned to rise, to heal, and to embrace the love she deserved. Marcus's internal battle played out in his eyes, and though Lena could see the regret, she didn't feel the need to engage with it. There was no room for bitterness in her heart anymore, only the space to accept what had been and to look forward to what was to come. As the night wore on, she found herself at peace. She had chosen to let go, and in doing so, she had opened herself to a future full of possibility and love. The gala was coming to a close, the final speeches filling the air with polite applause and the soft clinking of glasses. The guests, once bustling with energy, were slowly drifting toward the exits, their chatter still lingering in the corners of the room. The lights were dimming, casting shadows across the polished floors, and for a moment, Lena felt like she was in a dream. She stood beside Damien, watching the crowd, but she couldn't help but feel a shift in the atmosphere when her eyes landed on Marcus once again. It was as if the room had quieted around him. His face, usually so composed, now betrayed the turmoil beneath. He was watching her, or rather, watching her with Damien, the man who had made Lena feel more alive and valued than she had ever felt in the years with Marcus. The man who had given her something Marcus never had: respect and unconditional love. Marcus hadn't approached them all night, keeping his distance, his presence unmistakable but subdued. It seemed that the weight of the choices he had made over the past year was finally pressing down on him. As the speeches continued and the applause echoed through the hall, Marcus turned toward Damien, catching his eye. There was no anger in his gaze, no defensiveness, just a quiet recognition that things had changed. Everything had changed. Damien, ever calm and composed, acknowledged him with a nod, signaling that Marcus could approach. They walked to the side, away from the crowd, where the soft murmur of conversation continued in the background. Damien, Marcus said quietly, his voice hoarse, as if the words were heavy in his mouth. He hesitated, then continued, "I owe you an apology, and I owe Lena one too." Damien looked at him, his expression unreadable. "You don't owe me an apology, Marcus," he said evenly. "I'm not the one who needs to hear it." Marcus's eyes dropped, a deep regret welling up in him. "I should have never let her go. I was a fool. I was so focused on what I wanted, what I thought I deserved, that I lost sight of the person who had always been there for me. Lena, she deserved more than that. She deserved someone who saw her, truly saw her, and loved her with everything. And I failed her." Damien's gaze softened, but his voice remained steady. "I'm glad she didn't settle. She's too strong, too valuable for a man who couldn't appreciate her. She's better off without you." The truth in Damien's words stung. Marcus knew it, but it didn't change the fact that Lena was no longer his, and that realization cut deeper than any apology could heal. Lena, watching from the distance, felt a calm rise within her. The past, those months of doubt, pain, and heartbreak felt distant now. She had worked so hard to find herself again, to rebuild the life that had once been torn apart. And here she was, standing beside Damien, with a future ahead of her that felt full of promise. Marcus's regret was tangible, but it didn't reach her. She had no need for his apology. He had made his choice, and she had made hers. What mattered now was the life she was building, the love she had found in herself and in Damien. Her journey had been one of pain, yes, but it had also been one of healing and growth. She had learned to love herself again, to stand tall in the face of the hurt that had once seemed unbearable. With a quiet smile, Lena turned away from the conversation between Marcus and Damien, looking out into the distance. She felt no anger, no need for vengeance. All that remained was peace. The future was wide open, and it was hers to claim. Her life was her own again. Lena stood at the altar, her hand in Damien's, surrounded by the people who mattered most in her life. Her family, her closest friends. The soft hum of the string quartet filled the air, and the light streamed through the delicate glass windows of the small chapel, where she and Damien had decided to exchange vows. It was intimate, serene, nothing like the grandiose celebration she had once envisioned with Marcus. But somehow, this felt even more significant, more real. It wasn't about the opulence of the ceremony. It was about the love that had blossomed between them in the quiet spaces of their shared lives. Lena had never imagined that love could feel like this, steadfast and sure, gentle but powerful. Damien had shown her, day after day, what it meant to love without conditions, to love in a way that didn't ask her to prove her worth. He had loved her for the woman she was, not the woman she had been or the woman he wanted her to be. As the vows were exchanged, Lena's heart swelled with a profound sense of peace. She had come so far from the pain of her divorce. She had healed, rebuilt, and found something even more beautiful than she had imagined. A love that saw her, truly saw her. And now, standing beside Damien, she felt whole in a way she never had before. The reception that followed was filled with laughter, joy, and the warmth of friends who had supported them both. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect, full of love, full of life. Lena danced with Damien, their hands clasped tightly, their smiles never fading. For the first time in a long time, she didn't have to pretend. She was happy, truly happy. Meanwhile, Marcus's world had continued to unravel. The woman he had left Lena for had walked away from him, leaving him in the wake of his own poor decisions. The wealth that had once defined him was now dwindling, and the respect he had once commanded in the business world had eroded as quickly as his financial empire. He was left alone, a shell of the man he had once been, his arrogance now a bitter reminder of everything he had lost. His house, once filled with promises of a perfect life, stood empty, a reflection of his failures. And there, in the distance, was Lena, strong, radiant, and untouched by the ruin Marcus had brought upon himself. Lena had found happiness, had rebuilt her life, and was now building it with someone who appreciated her in ways Marcus never had. He was now nothing more than a shadow in her past, a distant echo that no longer had any power over her. Months later, Lena and Damien found themselves on a honeymoon in a small coastal town, far from the pressures of the city. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the ocean. Lena stood next to Damien, her arm linked through his, the warmth of the evening breeze ruffling her hair. They looked out at the breathtaking view, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. "I never thought I'd be here," Lena whispered, her voice soft with contentment. Damien smiled, kissing the top of her head. "I'm glad you are. The years of pain, the hurt, the feelings of being discarded and forgotten, they were all behind her now. What she had once thought was a chapter of her life that defined her, the divorce, had been nothing but a painful stepping stone to something far better. She hadn't needed Marcus's apology or his regret. She had found her worth without it. She had found herself, and in doing so, she had found the love she deserved. Lena's smile widened as she looked at Damien. They didn't need grand gestures or reminders of the past. They had each other, two souls who had found peace in each other's arms. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lena knew that her future was hers to shape. This was the life she had always dreamed of, not one defined by someone else's actions, but one she had crafted with her own hands, her own heart. This was her new chapter. If this story touched your heart, Like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.